Yeah. Yo, welcome back to another edition of the Men Who Cry podcast. Like I always say, like, subscribe, review, tell a friend, tell a friend, to tell a friend. If you're not doing these things, I have to assume that you do not pay your utility bills on time and your landlord's not fucking with that. On today's episode, just your boy, just me, like it always has been, talking to you about the sports stuff. Yes, we will be talking about the team that might be one of the greatest teams of all time that no one seems to be talking about. We will be talking about breaking up with your girl or partner in the middle of the night. But first, we will be talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Currently, the Bucks sit in, I believe, 10th place in the Eastern Conference. I know that they are under 500. They're 9-13. Giannis did get hurt in their most recent game against the Pistons, which the Bucks end up winning. So that's where they currently stand right now. I would be completely shocked if Giannis stays on the team this whole year and they are not in the playoffs, let alone the play-in. And the question I think now is more when, not if. This is happening. Like it just is. When Brian Windhorst made the great point of when the Bucks decided to cut Dame Lillard and sign Miles Turner to a deal to replace Brook Lopez, it basically was taking out a second mortgage on your home to buy a sports car. Like it wasn't really meant to do much. And to me, when you saw a trade like that, I think to me it spoke volumes to just how desperate this team was, right? And when your back's up against it and you have arguably the greatest player in your franchise history between him and who used to be known as Lou Alcindor, now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It was up to for debate. I would probably say Giannis for their franchise specifically. You can do whatever it is. It's like dating the really hot girl, right? If you're a guy and you're like, hey, this chick's kind of like out my league or whatever, or like I'm kind of lucky to be with her, you're more willing to do whatever it takes to keep her around, even if it's like not very beneficial to you. And I think for the Bucks, that's where they are with Giannis. But at the end of the day, this is ending. And I think the big question now is not only where does he go, but I think the fundamental kind of thought of this whole thing for me is this is going to be, I think, the truest test of the CBA, right? So for those who don't know, or I know a lot of people don't like to talk about the CBA, but the CBA, or the second apron era, was essentially put in place to stop teams like the Warriors and teams like the Clippers to just constantly keep, spending out the wazoo in terms of the cap, right? Now the penalties are way more harsh and way more restrictive, not just in terms of financially, but on terms of how you can actually build out your team and your roster and how to make your team win. And pretty much every player who has ever wanted to go to whatever team they've wanted to go to, they've gotten there in the history of the NBA. That's the one through line of the NBA that you can go back to, from Kareem to Shaq to LeBron to Durant to James Harden to Paul George. Like, while they all might not have gotten there directly, they got to where they wanted to go. The only guy that I would say most recently who that didn't happen to was Dame Lillard. Ironically, who's to the Bucks, right? He wanted to go to Miami. All the reports were that he wanted to go to Miami, and he never got there. He went to the Bucks, and then now he's back on the Blazers, currently healing up from an Achilles injury. But this is kind of what I think the second thing of what the CBA wanted to do was force players to stay on their teams, right? Whether it's you can give more years and more money on your deals. Players simply just have the fear now of hitting free agency. Uh, a lot of teams don't value cap space in the same way that they used to in the past. so there aren't these like landing spots for teams to kind of go to. And like I said before with the CBA, it's just so much harder to even enact some of these moves, even if you don't have the salary cap space. So this to me is going to be a deal of Giannis. It's not versus the Bucks, but Giannis versus the CBA, because he wants to go to the Knicks. If you listen to what Brian Windhorst has said, if you listen to what Sham said, in the summertime, or not really the summer, I guess right before the season started, I think it was about maybe a week before the season started, he wanted to go to New York, right? The videos of him walking around New York City over the summer appear to be true, right? And he doesn't actually have any way to get there, right? He has 2 years left on his deal. He's obviously not going to get cut, even though that's now becoming a thing with the teams. And the Knicks have already kind of paid their bounty, right? They have a team right now that a lot of people think can win the Eastern Conference. We'll see if they can actually compete with the team that we're going to mention later on. But it's just the finances don't really work in terms of Milwaukee and New York. And if you listen to Knicks Fan TV, CP the franchise, who's a host of there, he is reporting that the Knicks aren't interested in looking for Giannis or trying to trade for Giannis. We are now in the NBA where just having two great players does not guarantee to you anything. And how do I know that? Because look at Giannis's team the last 2 years, right? They had a version of a score first, get buckets point guard on their team 2 years ago, and the team won squat. Now you can tell me that those guys didn't play together at the end. Dame was hurt in some of those playoff runs. Giannis was hurt in some of those playoff runs. But at the same time, even when they played together, you never really got the idea that this kind of meshed. And so just because you rip apart your team and throw Giannis on it doesn't mean you're going to go far in the playoffs. We have now seen more that depth and the overall talent of your roster is way more important than just having maybe the best player in the league and then another top 10 player on your team, right? It doesn't go down like that. I say all this to say is that he seems very hell-bent to go to New York. And there are just so many other teams that I would put ahead of the Knicks as far as packages to get Giannis. Even if Giannis doesn't want to re-sign with them, I think Atlanta could put a good deal. Detroit, Houston, San Antonio. Those teams seem to have way more stuff that Milwaukee would want and can keep a requisite team around Giannis to say, okay, we can at least compete this year. And then next season, we can add some more pieces and really go for it in your final year of your deal. But does Giannis want that? Or does he no, I want to go to New York because I'm that dude? I think he's going to get traded. I do not think he's going to get traded to New York. I do think that he will end up on the Knicks one way or the other. Because, like I said before, this is a players' league. This league has always been a players' league. It always will be a players' league. And the finances of it don't match him right now. However, he's got 2 years to go. And if he goes to another team, we've already seen a guy, go to another team, win a championship, and still leave. Kawhi Leonard did that. We've seen a guy go to a team, get MVP votes, finish third in MVP, and say, I still want to get to where I want to go in Paul George. But the man has said what he said. And this is not him saying, I want to leave Milwaukee just because I want to leave Milwaukee. He said, I want to go to New York. Now, however that route gets sent is however it gets sent. But the one thing that I will say is that he is going to finish his career. He will play for the Knicks in his career. Okay? We will see that 34 Antetokounmpo jersey in New York at some point. I don't think that's happening this season. Reports are now that the Knicks maybe not trying to do it this season, but I think at some point he will end up on the roster. Um, how that goes, how that will go, we'll see how that stands time. But it is really going to be a conversation of how much pull does this dude have, and how long will it take for him to get to the place that he has said, not like repeatedly, he's gonna want to go to. Um, Speaking of another divorce, um, Chris Paul kind of shocked everyone in the middle of the night the other night, where he basically said that the Clippers told him to go home. Yes. Reports are that Lawrence Frank and the Los Angeles Clippers are trying to part ways with a guy that pretty clearly is their franchise player. Their all-time franchise player is Chris Paul. And it's so funny how this kind of went, and I think how people tend to stem things. And I think a lot of times when things get reported, because I remember you should think about this a lot as being a Knicks fan, right? There could be a situation that happens, and due to the perception of the franchise, the the people who tend to get looked at like lionized in these stories are the ones always opposing the franchise that we don't like, right? I do not know what happened between Chris Paul and the Clippers. Clearly, it seemed that Chris Paul was being Chris Paul, and Chris Paul is an asshole. We'll get to that in a sec. We'll dive deeper into that in a sec. But the idea that they fired that man in the middle of the night on the East Coast, something clearly went down. Fired, straight up. When's the last time you got dumped in the middle of the night? Your girl called you and broke up with you. Mind you, not just the fact that that all happened in the middle of the night when you're on the road. The dude who did it from your home base flew across the country when the flight game is now in the trash. You can't go to the airport now without dealing with some type of delay. You get to the airport, or you get to the place just to tell the dude that you're getting fired, or you don't come back, go home. That's insane. Which is why I have to go back to the idea that something went down between these two. Especially the fact that reportedly the head coach Ty Lue and Chris Paul weren't talking for weeks. There was a game. I guess a lot of people probably missed this because it was a Sunday night game, but it was when it was really early in the season. It was when the Suns were playing the Clippers. This might have been 10, 12 games into the year. And I turned on and I was watching it because I was like, oh, I'll watch. I'm pretty sure it was it might have been a Saturday night. It was a Saturday night game, late game. I was like, oh, I guess ESPN is just putting this on. And they flashed to Chris Paul. And first of all, they showed all Chris Paul's numbers. And I was like, Chris Paul's playing that bad? He was averaging like 2 points. It wasn't the fact that he was just playing that bad. He was out of the rotation. And I was like, okay. The one thing I know about dudes like Chris Paul, LeBron, Draymond Green, those dudes ain't built for losing. They not built for losing. Draymond Green is kicking dudes in the nuts going to the finals. Okay? LeBron James is posting memes of Kevin Love about fit in and fit out, with his teams going to the finals. Chris Paul's in the playoffs every single year punching dudes in the nuts. There are some dudes who do not have the ability to lose. And I could just imagine how Chris Paul is when teams are winning, right? And now he's an irritant, but he's not good anymore. The thing I will say a lot of times is that you can be great at basketball, right? No, let me rephrase that. Sorry. You can be not a great basketball player anymore, right? That's fine. Obviously, Chris Paul played 20 years. He's 40 or 39 years old. He's up there. No one was, I think, really expecting him to be like a really good player anymore. Maybe like a contributing player, but even in his stage of career, if he's not good anymore, that's fine, right? You can be an asshole. There's plenty of NBA players who are that, who are telling you how it is. I don't really care about your feelings. We come here to get a job done, yada, yada. You cannot be both. You cannot be an asshole and not good at basketball. And I think Chris Paul has entered that stage of his career where that is who he is. And no one wants to hear chirping from the guy who's not playing well anymore. It's just part of it, you know? People talk about this all the time. It's like how you say things to people is going to determine how they hear this stuff. I think about this a lot doing this show, right? Doing this pod. I know that I have to be careful with my words and my tone and things like that, because whether I can say as many times that I'm not this, I'm not that, once I say these things into this mic, people have to interpret my words the way that they want to interpret it. I don't really have control over that part of it anymore. And like, Chris is known for being that guy. And when you're winning games and you're a part of it, it's fine. You know, people will deal with it. The Clippers are terrible. They are terrible. And it leads me to this idea now of like, are they just a cursed franchise? I mean, look at how many runs they had. You think about that moment when the NBA vetoed the trade for Chris Paul to go to the Lakers, and he ended up going to the Clippers, where they just had Blake Griffin. They just got DeAndre Jordan. Doc, I believe they traded for, I think the next season, or maybe it was that offseason they traded for Doc Rivers. And those teams won 50 games or close to 50 games every year, never got to a conference finals. There was a moment where people thought, is Kawhi Leonard the best player in the NBA? They got him and they got Paul George, right? Everyone thinking they're going to win championships. Nothing. Then they are literally praying on James Harden's 37-year-old knees to keep them from giving Oklahoma City the number 1 pick in the draft. You can't make that up, right? And this, to me, like I said before, as much as I think Chris Paul did a lot to put himself in this situation, you can't do that to your guy, right? And like I said in the beginning, Chris Paul is their franchise. There is not a better player who has ever played for that franchise than Chris Paul, right? To treat him in the way that essentially Daryl Morey treated Carmelo Anthony. Now it's a little bit different because Carmelo wasn't like a legacy player, and Carmelo was still like a good player. Like, he played after that and was still contributing on the Blazers, and he played on the Lakers after that. But they did the same thing. The difference is that Carmelo has no loyalty or affinity for Houston, right? There was no real connection for him on the Rockets. He was just kind of like a guy to help Harden and Chris Paul get over the top. And it was extremely disrespectful when they did it to Carmelo. It's just because his personality is nothing like Chris Paul's, right? So for them to treat him, when, mind you, he's just gonna be riding the bench. Now, is he gonna be annoying as shit riding the bench? Yeah. But this is kind of supposed to be his retirement tour. This is supposed to be the time where he goes to arenas, right? He gets into the game at the end of the game, and he gets applauded, right? He has his moment, his flowers. And the fact that he might never get that is going to be kind of sad. And then it kind of oddly reminds me a little bit of how Calvin Johnson felt with the Lions, where Calvin Johnson is, to me, the greatest receiver I've ever seen play. I've still never seen a receiver do the things that Calvin Johnson did on the field. I remember him talking about him having this beef with the Lions for a long time for just being a terrible organization. And I think terrible organizations they're terrible for a reason. And the difference with the Clippers is that you would think that they wouldn't be, because they've done all the things to kind of exercise the bullshit. They left Staples Arena. They got a new owner. They've gotten great Hall of Fame players. They've made smart business decisions on the court. They've made good trades, and still they are the Clippers. It is like fascinating how it is just going to follow them forever, right? Um, so yeah, this situation got nasty, and it definitely won't be resolved anytime soon. But when Chris Paul and deservingly gets his jersey retired by the Clippers, I hope that's when it kind of eases out, and then eventually, you know, things can kind of get put to rest. Lastly, what we're going to talk about is something that oddly no one's talking about, but they should be talking about. And this kind of speaks to, I think, maybe the media at large, fortunately, is the Oklahoma City Thunder are favored to win every single game the rest of the year. I repeat, Oklahoma City is currently 21-1. They lost one game all year. It's December 4th, the day we were recording this. They are favorites to win every single game the rest of the year. I think that there is some kind of I'm not exactly sure why we don't talk about them as much. I think that they are, I would argue, somewhat boring of a team. Like, I don't really know anything about any of their players, right? Like, Hartenstein, he played for the Knicks, so I know a little bit about him, right? But Shea, he even did his documentary series. I think he's a good player. I think he's very, very good. I don't necessarily know if he has that like type of charisma per se, like an Ant has at times. J Dub seems to be kind of quiet and chill. Chet's the only one that you kind of know because he's been radicalized. Shout out to Tyler Hero. But he's the whole team is just kind of like, we just go out, ball, and then go home. And currently right now I don't see anyone touching them. Like, this is getting ridiculous. And the fact that once again they might have 3 lottery picks in this draft just speaks to just how insane this team has been. But I do wonder the overall kind of like purpose of this team, right? Like, how things are going to go and how long can this really last? Because as of right now, I mean, even if they just get 1 lottery pick, I don't think they're going to get all 3, but if they just get 1 lottery pick, they could have this run for the next. This really could be the new Spurs. They are so ahead of the game with everyone that I don't see them being bad for the next 10 to 15 years. I don't know how. Unless, like, everyone got hurt or they made like just a balls in trade, but Presti's never really done that. Even when he went and got Paul George, you look back at that trade package, you're like, it was Sabonis and Victor Oladipo. All right. 2 guys who ended up, I don't know if Sabonis ever made an all NBA team, but both guys may have made all-star teams. Since that trade. But those guys were nowhere near the level of player that Paul George was. And then he flipped Paul George again to get the team essentially that they have now. I do think that this is going to be the potential to be one of the greatest teams of all time. I mean, right now their net rating, I just saw a report on it, would be the highest of all time. It's at 15.1. Right now the current record is the Bulls at like 13.2, right? That's nuts. And the fact that they already have had this team together and they just got their second best player back or third best player back, and he's only played like a handful of games, is what makes this team even scarier to kind of think about. So I will say that they will fall short of the 7-3-9 Warriors, but they should be head and shoulders the favorites to win the NBA championship. All right. That is the show that we have for you guys today. Like I said before, please like, subscribe, review, tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. This is the Men Who Cry podcast. I'm your boy, Just. I'll be back again later next week to talk to you guys all of this sports. All right, y'all. Peace.